so much of directing is what they call, the intangibles. when they're assessing different athletes, they say, oh, this guy's got the intangibles. It's just about like working with people and trying to create a good energy on set. So much of baseball is rooted in like the rituals that players do to try to ensure success, inside jokes, and I think you need that same kind of group spirit when you're making a film too.
Carson Lund, great to have you on Underexposed. Eephus has been hailed the best sports movie of the decade by GQ magazine. It's also unlike any sports movie you've probably ever seen in all the best ways. About a month ago, I was walking out of IFC Center here in New York, and I happened to meet Ashish, one of the executive producers of Eephus, who told me about it, and I saw it and I absolutely loved it. And now I'm telling everybody else to go see it. So, Carson, congratulations. Welcome. Great to have you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
For those who don't know what Eephus is and haven't experienced the movie yet, I wonder if you could just give us a quick setup.
Yeah, so Eephus is a baseball movie, as you alluded to. The film is essentially one last game played in an amateur rec league before the field on which they play is set to be redeveloped into a school. So it's kind of an odd structure for a film, but it's one baseball game played in New England in the autumn, in the final days of autumn, basically, before the winter comes. And it's rooted in my own experiences playing baseball and just sort of observations and characters I made over the years. Yeah, and it's a comedy, but it's also a film about kind of coming to terms with the loss of a certain ritual and sort of dealing with change, the passage of time.
Both movies and baseball, they're both pastimes that don't necessarily sit comfortably in the digital age. I think that both require you to surrender in the way that they both warp time. I
Mhm.
love movies like Goodbye Dragon Inn, which I understand was an influence of yours putting this movie together. And I wonder what drew you to that tradition of like so-called slow cinema for this movie.
Yeah, that was a good jumping off point. Something like Goodbye Dragon Inn, or yeah, I mean, I've been very, very inspired by so-called slow cinema over the years. Belatar, Apichatpong, all these filmmakers. I don't think Eephus ends up feeling like a slow cinema work, but I still took some cues from Goodbye Dragon Inn in terms of how the screening of the film in that movie becomes like the structure by which the whole narrative takes place. It's like the container, and the movie theater is the setting, and it kind of gives the filmmaker freedom to move around that space freely as the film is playing. And I thought that would be a really fun way to dramatize a sporting event, even at the kind of lowest level of sporting events, lowest level of competition. I thought, okay, this is a ritual. I play in a league where you go there every Sunday, you play with the same guys, and every week it's a little bit different, and you have a very special, unique relationship with this team, the team that you're a part of, and you're playing it on a public park, and things happen, and distractions happen. The outside world intervenes, and it's sort of like the whole thing is like an event. So I thought Goodbye Dragon was a really useful reference point in that sense. But and then certainly the where that film ultimately gets to by the end, which is a sort of like deep, deep melancholy, with all the characters trying to figure out how to move forward. Now that they are losing this like essential monolith of their lives, which is this cultural institution. What is left after that? So there's a few shots at the end of that movie that I think I kind of directly quoted in Eephus by the end of the film. But why did I want to sort of warp time with this film? I think because baseball itself it warps time in its kind of purest form. Before there was the introduction of a pitch clock. This is a game that sort of doesn't have a clock and just could theoretically go on forever. It develops its own sense of rhythm and pace, often dictated by the flow of a pitcher's movements. And as long as outs aren't made or the game is tied, the thing could go on forever. So playing baseball and watching baseball is a way of escaping time, or a way of escaping the drudgery of our lives. It's a sort of escape hatch. It's like a form of release or a refuge. And I wanted to make a film in which all the characters are coming to this place to have that escape, but yet time still marches on in the background. So it's kind of the attempt to defeat time, and yet the time still defeating the characters.
You alluded earlier to playing baseball. I'm wondering if you have any insights about what the commonalities there might be, or what you might have learned while being a baseball player you were able to bring to filmmaking.
From a very young age, I was doing both. I mean, baseball was kind of my main hobby throughout my early life. I was playing constantly. I was playing in traveling leagues, all-star teams, all this sort of stuff. And, at some point I just kind of grew a bit exhausted by the culture of it and all the pressure and the attitudes of my teammates and the need to stay in shape and all this stuff. And I got more interested in art and I started making films, but I was still playing baseball. So I was doing the two things at the same time. But eventually I abandoned baseball for what I thought was a permanent. But then when I moved to California, I came back to baseball. So throughout my life, I've kind of been weaving the two pastimes into my activity. So, and I do see parallels. Playing on a team, baseball's an odd game where it's it's both the individual successes and failures really matter in terms of your overall stats and how you feel about playing the game, and yet it's a very one person's outcome doesn't necessarily dictate the whole. It's truly a collective game in that sense, and I think that's true of filmmaking too. I mean, I think being a director on Eephus was a lot like being a coach of a baseball team. Trying to get everybody on the same page, moving towards a common goal. I was actually hitting everyone ground balls and throwing them batting practice. It's all about just managing people and finding the best way to work together. So much of directing is what they call, the intangibles. when they're assessing different athletes, they say, "Oh, this guy's got the intangibles." It's just about like working with people and trying to create a good energy on set. So much of baseball is rooted in like the rituals that players do to try to ensure success, inside jokes, and I think you need that same kind of group spirit when you're making a film too.
Tell us about putting this movie together, like putting this team together, so to speak, and what the challenges were of getting a movie like this, which I think I don't know how did this movie sell on paper? How did you explain this movie to people and get them on board to be a part of it?
um, well, yeah, I knew I was making something a bit esoteric or a bit unorthodox in its structure. Because there are no main characters in this film. It's a true ensemble piece. I wanted to give each character their own weight and their own identity, and not let anyone just be an extra or a background character. Because everyone in this movie is going through the same thing. So that can be a hard sell for people. Okay, well, how's the audience going to lock into this story if they don't have a sort of main point of identification? That is a good question, but I knew also that I was tapping into the history of baseball, the fandom of baseball. It is a deeply rooted American pastime. So I think I can find someone who we haven't had many good baseball films in a while. So I was like, I think I can find someone who's going to just sort of like emotionally connect to this world and to the idea of a communal ritual and a sort of social outing, and as something that we have kind of lost a bit in the modern world. This idea of people coming together to do a sort of quote unquote meaningless hobby that they share a passion for, and no one's making any money over it. So I think like those sort of activities have kind of drifted from our lives a bit. In the modern world. So I thought there were many different like avenues that I could touch upon when pitching this film that people really could relate to. I think I've been on the tour with this film for a while, and I can't tell you how many people have come and told me that the film really reflects their own experience playing this game. It brought them back to when they used to play the game, reminded them of old teammates, this sort of thing. So it's really like touching a nerve, I think. And it somehow is able to connect despite its kind of odd pacing and odd structure.